Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Jordan Tracy. Let's go inside Utah politics. We begin this morning with the political aftermath of the shooting seen and heard around the world.
Look what happened.
A shooter at the rally for former President Donald Trump appears to have nearly shot the Republican nominee in the head. The former president escaped with just an injured ear to be welcomed to resounding cheers at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Here in Utah, GOP leadership making clear the shooting firmed up the party's support of the former president.
We are resolute to the patriotic duty to fight for this country and to promote values that transcend this violent act and something that should never stand.
Utah GOP Chair Rob Axson there sharing his feelings with ABC4 in the minutes and hours following the shooting. The former president later spoke at the RNC, sharing a commitment to national unity.
As Americans, we are bound together by a single fate and a shared destiny. We rise together or we fall apart. I am running to be president for all of America, not half of America, because there is no victory in winning for half of America.
And here to assess the new political landscape with us, we have Jason Perry, the director of the Hinckley Institute of Politics at the University of Utah. Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
So let's dive in. Big picture question here. How have we seen so far that this attempted assassination has impacted the race?
Well, it has in lots of ways, not just his race. It's impacted where the Democrats are going as well. I'll just say what happened there is impacting a lot of what's happening in the country. A couple things. One is we're seeing some of the polling start to rise. It was, really close for a long time, but we've seen some of the polling for former President Trump starting to go up a little bit. That image that we saw with his hand in the air has caused people to sort of rally around him. Money is starting to flow. The numbers are starting to come up. The endorsements are starting to come up. It happened at a time right before the Republican National Convention that really had a theme through every speech that happened.
Yeah, it seemed that theme was unity, and they talked about going into it, the Trump campaign talking about how unity was going to be the message. He had scrapped his original speech and brought in that new one. It seemed, though, I don't know what you thought, it seemed, though, it was more about Republican unity. It seemed like all of the Republicans, we saw Nikki Haley and now Governor Spencer Cox joining in as a Republican unit going forward in November. Yeah,
we heard before the big speech that happened this week that it was going to be about unity. And this was a long, record-breaking amount of time.
Very long.
For a speech right here. And it's interesting because it had a couple of parts to it. The first part was really about unity, kind of uniting the country a little bit. It was about Republicans a lot. It's interesting, one might say it was about uniting around him also. So that was what he really referred to a lot right there. Is he didn't want to just be the president for part of the country. He wanted to be for everyone. But it was really rally around him at a time that was really important for him. And it did bring a few endorsements. It brought a lot of money. Even some high-profile philanthropists and even business leaders came to his side after all of this happened.
And the campaign seemed to have really driven that point about having unity and that there was going to be a different former President Trump. But it seemed like when he got off topic, when he got off the teleprompter, it was very much Trump rally again. Does that kind of, move the needle the opposite way for maybe moderates who were thinking, let's see a different President Trump, and then they didn't really see it different?
So, this is why I say it was kind of two different speeches. That first part was very much, hey, that's like tempered. That's like about unity. The second part was a rally speech, of course, and I don't think that really turned people off because it's not like he's unknown. We know exactly what we're going to get. It was the other part that I think was people were sort of thinking about. The other part, yeah, that's exactly what we thought. It was the first part people were saying, oh, maybe that's a tone that we like a little more. And some, I think, are saying that's the tone we want you to continue to have.
Does the endorsement from Nikki Haley and now Governor Cox, does that help him in any way, bring some of those, moderate Republicans who may have been never Trump, which we thought Governor Cox might have been, turns out he's not. Does that bring them into the fold now?
I think it brings some of them. Some of it is about who your options are also. I think a lot of this new rhetoric, this toning down some of the polar conversations or polarizing conversations, I think that's helping a little bit. But I think mostly people are saying, okay, this is clearly going to be our candidate. That's what the Republicans are saying right now. He is the person we have to rally behind. He chose a vice presidential candidate that is going to propel that farther than 4 years, maybe even a little longer than that. So people are looking at the long term and saying, yeah, I got to get on board with this a little more and maybe disagree a little better, maybe throw my support to someone who's probably going to be around.
Yeah, and we're still over 100 days from Election Day, and it's kind of hard to think of something like this being a campaign point. It was a horrible event that happened on that Saturday, but that image of him with his fist in the air, is that something that you think the campaign will continue to keep in voters' minds as we head towards November? Without question. In fact, some of these people, as they endorse him, are referencing his poise right there, him standing up tall when the bad things are happening right there. That one picture sort of, I think, epitomizes his entire campaign all the way through the end. That's what they'll show when the Republican National Convention starts, when they start having their moment in the spotlight. People are going to use that as the rally cry, as he stood up. He was preserved. He stood up for all of us in the face of great danger, and he is our standard bearer. Without question, that is the image that kind of is at the heart of the whole campaign going forward. Does that hit a certain, a block of voters? I feel like that's going to resonate a lot with young men from multiple different racial communities that could push him in those margins there that, of course, President Biden might not be doing so well in. Yeah, it absolutely could help. I mean, he's trying to broaden his support. President Trump has a base that has not gone anywhere. When they were with him before the assassination attempt and the convention, they're completely with him now. And what we're starting to see with some of these endorsements and other things is more people coming around saying there are parts of this right here that I can support. And I think we're going to see more of the demographics starting to fall in line for him in the Republican Party in particular, which is what he needs. Let's talk about the Republican Party as a whole, because the RNC also goes through the platform of the Republican Party going forward. There was some interesting changes, some watering down in some of their platform. They removed all mentions of opposition to same-sex marriage, and then the party clarifying that they only oppose later-term abortion. What do you read into that move from the party platform? Is this the normal moving towards the middle for a general election, or do they see these issues that could hurt them if they don't do this? So I think it's both. These are two issues right here that are clear separators from the Republicans, from the Democrats. And this is an effort to sort of broaden that support. And for some of these issues like abortion, for example, the court has, of course, ruled that this is a state issue. And that they want to, the Republicans want to take all these states across the country as well. So as they sort of broaden the high-level approach from the party overall, leaving it to the local, for the states to figure out some path, it really broadens that base, broadens the possibilities for support, and makes it a little bit less of a lightning rod for them nationally. Bring it back home, let you handle these things at home politically. And that perfectly transitions us to J.D. Vance. Yeah. Because he has been on some of the extremes of these platform issues. He's been selected, the Ohio senator, to be the vice president nomination with Donald Trump. And he doesn't seem to bring anything broader to the ticket. He seems to be a doubling down for President Trump. There are a couple things he brings. One is you will see him getting more support from those Rust Belt states, the ones that President Trump really wants to get. He, in some ways, people say he is the epitome of the American dream of sorts, where you start from where you head up. Look at hillbilly elegy story. Yeah, exactly. His whole story, which a lot of people do know, and he references it a lot. So you talk about this story where you can rise. I think that appeals to a lot of people. But I think what's sort of even more interesting about his selection, given some of his background and his positions, is he is the continuation of President Trump going forward. President Trump could have chosen someone that is, just appeals to a certain demographic, certain groups, but he chose someone that's going to perpetuate his policies and his platform. Some people say this is the continuation of MAGA way beyond President Trump, and I think that is what he's thinking about. It's a legacy choice also. But because of that, do you think Democrats kind of take a sigh of relief? It's not Marco Rubio, someone who is moderate, someone who's a little more toned down than J.D. Vance. That could have been even more harmful for our chances. But because they doubled down on the MAGA, that gives them a little little more, we can continue to attack on some of the extreme positions.
Well, they still will attack on some of those extreme positions, but I'm not sure they're going to find a ton of relief. It's interesting, he's a younger candidate. In some ways, you know, the Republicans are saying this may be the future. You know, in a campaign, it's all about age. You know,
sure.
Who has the capacity to lead, how long can they lead.
This might be the one campaign that it's all about age.
Yeah, so it is. So you look at that as a factor as well. And I think a lot of this is leading the Democrats to, you know, I don't think they're saying, well, it's a relief we've got him. They're still looking at this saying, wow, that changes the calculation a little bit. We have to maybe think about our calculation.
Now, real quickly, let's talk about the Democratic side because things are heating up there.
Yeah.
There's a stronger push. You have Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer reportedly pushing the president to step aside. What do you think is the future here? It's all up to Biden to decide that. But do you think that this is a path that they could actually take with the convention just a couple of weeks away?
Well, so the answer, they can, and I think we'll have some answers to that pretty soon. What you referenced is right. It is entirely the decision of President Biden. He has nearly 4,000 delegates that are committed to him. If he is going to be the one that continues forward, which is his choice, of course, a lot of pressure can be brought to bear, but ultimately his choice. If he decides to go forward, that's who they're going to go with. There are a few options, and they're sort of unprecedented options. And they are not easy options if he decides to step aside. But that is still a distinct possibility because what the Democrats right now have been rallying around President Biden, but what they want most of all, if it's not him, they want to control the White House. That is the ultimate thing that they need to have in their side. So the calculations are going forward right now. Can President Biden still win? And there's a path, all right, but it's harder and harder every day, it seems like. So they'll be monitoring and they might have some candidates in mind.
Yeah, that will definitely be something interesting to see because it seems like the polls have been the thing that have been pushing this. And, you know, we know from 2016, polls are sometimes hard to read.
Well, they're really hard to read. And this is really hard to poll, particularly when you have two candidates that no one's really thrilled about having.
That's
I mean, you have some pockets, but, you know, when you ask people a question and your options or you're not completely thrilled about it, you might not answer the poll. You might not answer the way you really feel. So it's very hard. Everything is unprecedented about this particular campaign, and I don't think we'll have really great polling numbers, which is why some of this is going beyond just the polling. All
right, Jason Perry from the Hinckley Institute of Politics, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, well, still ahead inside Utah politics, we just talked about it. President Biden considers rent hike caps, how long the White House wants to see housing prices held in place. And coming up, bringing back the games, how Utah's top delegates to Paris are preparing their final pitch. Welcome back. The White House is working to cap annual rent increases to combat the high cost of housing across the country. President Biden made the official announcement during his trip to Las Vegas to rally support from Black and Latino voters. Washington correspondent Jesse Turnor reports on the plan.
About a third of Americans are renters, and President Joe Biden says most are paying far too much for their homes.
It's time things get back in order a little bit.
The president is proposing a 5% cap on yearly rent increases, which would apply to corporate landlords who own 50 or more units.
We're going to make a lot of changes that I've been talking about, because we're going to continue to grow this economy.
According to Apartment List, the average rental is about $1,400, so the president's proposal would limit the increase to $70 a month. Biden administration officials say the cap would last for 2 years and
serve as a bridge until more housing units are built and housing units currently under construction become available.
But some industry groups criticize the plan because it doesn't immediately address the overall housing shortage. In a statement, the National Multifamily Housing Council says rent control has been tried for decades and been a resounding failure. Now is the time for actual solutions, not electioneering. Housing costs have been a major driver of overall inflation, but the latest inflation report revealed a long-awaited decline. That could help urge the Federal Reserve to make an interest rate cut soon. On Monday, Fed Chair Jerome Powell stressed it's still a delicate balance.
If we ease too early, we can undermine the progress on inflation, and if we wait too late, we can undermine economic activity.
The Fed meets next at the end of the month. In Washington, I'm Jesse Turnor.
Another big policy the president is reportedly considering: Supreme Court reform. Several sources tell the Associated Press Biden is mulling over term limits for justices and an ethics code enforceable by law. It would mark a major shift for the president, who has long resisted calls to reform the court, but he has grown more vocal about his concerns that the court has left the mainstream. He's also considering a constitutional amendment to eliminate broad immunity for presidents as described by the court during its most recent term. Lawmakers are putting some pressure on the Secret Service over the attempt on former President Donald Trump's life. Officials say he had even more security around him due to a threat from Iran. The House Oversight Committee plans to hold the first congressional hearing into the shooting. House Speaker Mike Johnson also reportedly plans to form a bipartisan task force to investigate Secret Service. New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez has been found guilty on all counts in his federal corruption trial, 16 counts, including bribery, obstruction of justice, and acting as a foreign agent. Jurors spent 2 months listening to testimony, even physically holding some gold bars seized from the FBI from the senator's home in June of 2022. The FBI also found $500,000 in cash, some of it stuffed in envelopes, inside the senator's boots, and a jacket bearing his name. The senator is remaining defiant.
I have every faith that the law and the facts did not sustain that decision and that we will be successful upon appeal. I have never violated my public oath. I have never been anything but a patriot of my country and for my country. I have never, ever been a foreign agent.
Menendez is the first American to be convicted of being a public official who acted as an agent of a foreign government, namely Egypt. He is scheduled to be sentenced October 29th. He faces the possibility of decades in prison, and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is asking that he resigns. Utahns are mourning a longtime public servant this weekend. Dave Buehler served as Utah's 8th Commissioner of Higher Education for more than 7 years. Before that, he taught at the University of Utah, served as a Utah State Senator, and was a member of the Salt Lake City Council. Condolences are pouring in from state leaders like Governor Spencer Cox. He was 67 years old. Olympic fever is settling in Utah and across the world, and a delegation of state leaders and athletes are preparing to make their final pitch to bring the Games home to Utah for 2034. As we've previously reported, Governor Spencer Cox, Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall, and 5 other Olympic organizers are on the presentation team. Utah has already been designated as a preferred host, so Mayor Mendenhall tells us they're ready to start preparing the moment the International Olympic Committee makes things official.
There will be so much work to do in the years to come, not just at that global scale of welcoming the world, but also here locally. And our goal, my goal, is to have this benefit our community at the grassroots level.
Once the decision is official, the mayor tells us it's going to be a joint effort between her office, the state, the county, lawmakers, and the organizing committee over the next decade. The Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute suggests the Games could generate over $6 billion in total economic impact. The IOC will announce its final decision from Paris on July 24th at 2:30 a.m. our time. We'll be up extra early to bring you the historic announcement live on air, along with team coverage on the big community watch party happening at Washington Square in downtown Salt Lake City. So join us at 2:30 in the morning on Pioneer Day. Coming up, questions linger around President Biden. We're talking to a Utah Democrat advocating for the president to step aside. Stay with us.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Welcome back to Inside Utah Politics. With the Republican National Convention over, all eyes turn to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Many Democrats are still voicing concerns about how the president's subpar debate performance, among other issues, could hamper their chances at keeping the White House. One Utah Democrat making his voice heard on that matter, District Attorney Sim Gill. He posted on X in part, quote, "Joe, you have given more than your fair share of measure, bittersweet, it's time. He joins us here today. District Attorney Gill, thank you so much for taking the time.
Happy to be here.
So let's start with that post of yours.
Yeah.
What prompted you to decide to speak on this issue?
Well, several things. First of all, I'm a Democrat. If Joe Biden is the nominee, I'm going to be voting for him. If he is not the nominee and we have another nominee, I'm going to be voting for him because I think that's important in terms of the context of this election. The reason I tweeted that was for several reasons. One, that we are not a personality cult. We are driven by ideas, and our ideas are our strength, and we weren't focusing on them as much as I thought we needed to focus on them. And the second thing is that I think I was feeling the same thing that very many people are feeling, which is the lack of transparency and sharing of what is going on. We want our community to help make that decision, and I think my criticism was really about the handlers who are around him, who have kept him away from the communications and having those dialogues so we can make an informed decision. So I was trying to channel a lot of different concerns I think a lot of us are feeling right now.
So he's since had what was called the Big Boy press conference. He's also done many interviews. Have any of his defiance about staying in the race switched your opinion at all about him staying in the race?
I think that what it has highlighted is that the concerns that were raised are still there in the sense, is he our very best candidate? And what are we going to do as a party together? I absolutely believe at the end of the day we're all going to unify and we're going to vote in unison. But I think the debate is healthy, and we are in this situation not because of something Joe did, but it's because of what his handlers did and not being transparent with our community.
And you're seemingly the only Utah Democrat to speak out on this issue. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's others who are probably feeling the same thing. It's just that I think in our party we get to raise those issues, we get to have honest conversations, but at the same time, I don't think anybody in my party has lost the focus. There is an existential threat here to our republic, and there is a binary choice to be made in one side and this side. And on this side, you've got people who are given the largest investment in our infrastructure in the last 50 years. Unemployment is down at the lowest level that it's ever been. There's one who's committed to the idea of a democratic republic in a fundamental way, which defines American identity, and the other side is not. So that is the binary choice. But at the same time, we did not abdicate. As Democrats, the means matter to us as much as the ends that we pursue. And the means is having an open, honest, transparent, and sometimes difficult conversation. But at the end, we know what our ideals and what our values are.
Did you have a candidate in mind that you think could replace President Biden?
No, I think everybody is an open field, right, in that sense. I think that there are people like Pritzker. I think there's people like Brashear. I think there are Harris. There are lots of people out there in terms of the ideas. It is not tied to one person. It is our ideas, our ideals, our values which resonate with people, not a personality. Joe Biden has done more for this country than anyone else in terms of the career of public service that he's given. But as I said in my tweet, our human bodies are all too human. It catches up with us. So it's not his fault. My criticism really is the way we've gotten into this point, which was less than transparent.
Now, I want to talk to you about some of your own work. Your office recently announced an election bribery charge against former Republican Attorney General candidate Frank Mylar. Perceived polarization of the justice system is something that has been talked about widely. How do you go about prosecuting a case that can be seen as political?
Very simple. The same way that we prosecute all of our cases, which is you let the evidence drive the conversation and you let the evidence drive the prosecution. We wouldn't have filed it if we didn't meet our ethical standards and our evidentiary standards, and we let the evidence go where it is. There's a presumption of innocence that applies. It applies here under our system, but based on what was what the complaint was, what the investigation was, and what the elements of the offense are, and what the evidence is, that's why we filed the charges that we did.
And that's a case that you're going to be able to make to the public to see that this, isn't a political case.
Well, I think overwhelmingly majority of our people in this country still believe in the rule of law. It is the fringe politics that call it into question. And the integrity of the system is demonstrated every day in the courtrooms across this nation. The rule of law still matters. Evidence still matters. If you don't have the evidence, you don't have the case. As simple as that.
All right, District Attorney Gill, thank you so much for joining us for Inside Utah Politics.
Thank you for the privilege.
All right, folks, stay with us. We have more coming up after the break. That does it for today's Inside Utah Politics. Don't forget, if you have any local political stories you'd like to see, make sure to reach out. You can email InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com. You can also follow along with me on social media on X at Jordan Tracy TV, as well as on Instagram. You can search for Jordan Tracy. Find ABC4 on social media to follow along no matter where you are. And while you're at it, download the ABC4 News app. We're always on. Thanks for being with us, everyone. We will see you next week.